Hey friend, please subscribe and like the video. 1 second for you, a big deal for me. Part 1. The Quiet Line. You Don't Cross My Name is Eleanor Hart, and the day I realized my daughter had stopped seeing me as her mother was a bright, ordinary Sunday in late September. We were at Basil and Bone, the little place by the harbor in Rockport, Maine, where the waiters know your order before you sit. Chowder, brown bread, 2 hot coffee. Sophie had chosen it, said the windows would make me feel less boxed in. She smiled too much when she said it, as if happiness could be arranged like place settings. I had just turned 69. Almost 70, my son-in-law Miles kept saying, with the crisp cheer of a man who thinks numbers win arguments. On the table sat a lone cupcake with a candle I didn't blow out. I was still reading the smoke when Sophie leaned in, brushing lint from my sleeve like I was a garment on a rack. "After lunch," she said, soft as a nurse. "We'll swing by your place, just to check the boiler. There's a cold snap coming." When the server walked away, Sophie angled her head toward Miles, and that's when I heard it, a whisper with edges. "Keep her talking," she said. "I'll have the locksmith meet us." I didn't lift my eyes. I didn't move. I let my thumb circle the rim of my cup, the way I used to sand cedar rails on the porch. My late husband Tom and I built the summer Sophie turned 7. Cedar and coffee, 2 smells that never learned to lie. I have been many things in this life: a wife, a bookkeeper, a choir alto, a woman who could fold grief into laundry and keep the house warm anyway. But I have never been a fool. People show you who they are in the small words, the ones they think will slide under the noise. I listened until the silence after the whisper felt like a door closing. When Miles left to take a work call, I smiled at Sophie. She smiled back, too bright. "Mom," she said, "it would be good for you to stay with us a few weeks." "Just till we get you sorted," I said, like I was a drawer. "Your house is a lot," she went on. "Stairs, snow. The neighborhood's not what it was. The harbor's still there," I said. "And the gull that hates the postman. He'll never retire." She laughed, but her eyes did not. It was a long lunch. I let it be. I told her about the chapel roof leaking and the woodworker who offered to fix the pews for free because his mother used to sing where I stand now, 2nd row, 3rd from the aisle. Sophie nodded, checked her watch. My coffee cooled. Boats slipped past the window like sentences I decided not to speak. When we got to the house, the salt-grayed cape with a red door Tom and I painted crooked in '82, the locksmith's van was already in my driveway. "Preventative maintenance," Miles said to the air. I set my hand on the red door and felt the grain press back. "No," I said. Miles's smile twitched. "Eleanor, let the professional—" "No," I said again, louder, as if I were calling a child out of the road. Then I did the thing my daughter didn't expect. I turned, walked down the steps, and sat on the porch swing. The chain creaked like an old friend. "I've already changed the locks," I said. Sophie blinked. "Since when?" 3 weeks ago." I waited for the gull to shriek on cue. He did, and I moved the deed. Miles tried to laugh. It didn't quite happen. "Moved the deed?" "To a life estate," I said, still looking at the water, "and the rest into a charitable trust with Mrs. Albright from the library as co-trustee. We used to shelve periodicals together. She remembers where things belong." Sophie's face softened, then hardened in quick flickers. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You told me," I said, in a whisper I wasn't meant to hear. The locksmith hovered, eyes on his shoes. Miles sent him away with a flat wave and followed it with a speech about guardianship and best practices for aging in place. Each phrase polished like silverware you barely use. When they left, Sophie hugged me too tight, the way a person grips a package that isn't theirs yet. After I watched their taillights vanish past the crab shack, I went inside, leaned my forehead against the cool of the refrigerator, and exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. I set a kettle on. While the water hummed, I opened the drawer with the rubber bands and the takeout menus and pulled out Mr. Ken Richards' business card, elder law attorney, patient eyes, hands that didn't rush. He'd drafted Tom's will and held my hand when I signed the papers with a name that suddenly felt heavier without Tom inside it. When he picked up, I said, "It's time." He said, "Come in the morning. Bring your church calendar and any letters with your name misspelled. Those end up mattering." I slept that night the way you sleep when you hear footsteps on your roof and decide not to be afraid. Grief is loud when it begins. It bangs pots and throws shadows into corners. Later, it learns your habits and waits in the soft places. After Tom died, Sophie and I learned to live with the waiting. She was a sweet girl once, sticky-faced from popsicles, kneecaps scabbed, always carrying around a damp paperback from the thrift store that smelled like basements and old women. She loved the house because we loved it in front of her. Love is contagious when you're small. Somewhere between college and the first job in Boston, she began measuring square footage, salaries, the weight of silver on a table. I don't blame the world for teaching her its math, but there's another kind, the one Tom taught her with pencils behind his ear and sawdust in his beard, where value is counted in handprints on a stud you never cover with drywall. When Sophie married Miles Rowan, he shook Tom's hand at the church door, eyes already scanning the ceiling fan, the exit signs, the crowd. He told me he sold solutions, which is what men say when they sell things they don't want you to ask about. I said congratulations and brought out the lemon bars, each cut into squares the size of a promise. For a while it went fine. Sunday dinners, 2 holidays where nobody cried. Then the sentences changed. We replaced you. Protect replaced share. The word inheritance entered the conversation like a moth you can't catch. You learn with age that you don't fight storms. You brace and you build. So I built, quietly, the way Tom and I laid the first course of brick on a humid August morning. Slow, level, checking the line twice. I documented my bills. I scanned every letter. I had my doctor write up a cognitive assessment I did not need, because sometimes truth needs paperwork to be believed. I placed cameras where lilies used to be. I told Mrs. Albright to practice saying the phrase, "I am the co-trustee." When the petition landed, emergency temporary guardianship, I was baking molasses cookies. The sheriff was polite. He took off his hat, as if he was worried he'd muss my air. He was only 19 when Tom helped him fix his truck with a length of hose and a prayer. Now he called me ma'am and explained what the paper meant as if it didn't mean what it meant. "Do I have to leave my house tonight?" I asked. "No, ma'am," he said. "There'll be a hearing. Judge will want to see you." I put the cookies in a tin. "Then I'll be seen," I called Ken. He answered on the first ring. "Good," he said. "Let's get to work." Part 2. How you hold a line. The courthouse in Camden is the kind of brick building that looks like it was designed to hold both winter and the truth. The day of the hearing was clear, bright as a polished dime, cold enough to make your breath feel important. Sophie sat at the petitioner's table in a navy dress that used to be mine, back when my hips were ambition and my waist didn't mind coffee after 6. Beside her, Miles wore the expression of a man about to close on a property. Their attorney, Mr. Pike, had hair that did not move and a voice that did. "Your Honor," he began, with a sympathetic tilt toward me, "we are here out of concern, not greed." Mrs. Hart has recently made impulsive financial decisions, including the sale of assets and the transfer of her home's deed into opaque arrangements. She is isolated, vulnerable, and susceptible to undue influence. He placed his palm gently on a folder the width of a paperback novel. We ask for temporary guardianship to stabilize her situation. The judge, Honorable Marion Doyle, is the age I would have been if time had taken a different road. Her hair is iron gray, her eyes soft in the way that allows sternness to land without breaking. She turned to me. "Mrs. Hart?" I stood, knees talking back, nerves trying to make my mouth forget how to be useful. Ken touched my elbow, a small reminder that I was not alone, even if that's exactly what this kind of petition tries to make you feel. "Your Honor," I said, "I'm not confused. I'm careful." I handed the clerk a pile of documents held together with a battered binder clip, bank statements with tidy columns, receipts with my initials in the corner, the life estate deed, the charitable trust agreement listing Mrs. Albright and me as co-trustees, my dated cognitive evaluation, 98th percentile memory, better than it feels when I'm trying to remember the neighbor's nephew's name at the mailbox. Ken rose. He is not a dramatic man. He believes in letting paper do some of the talking. "Exhibits A through G," he said, "and one more, Your Honor. Exhibit H." He pressed a button on a small speaker he'd placed on the table. A voice filled the courtroom, tinny, clear, unmistakable. Sophie's voice. "Keep her talking. I'll have the locksmith meet us." The date and timestamp glowed on the printout. The ring camera I'd hidden in the potted fern by the porch captured more than I'd prayed it might. Not just the whisper. The second sentence, too, Miles's reply, quiet, practiced. "Once the locks are done, call Pike. File emergency. She'll sign eventually." An exhale went through the room like a wind shifting. Sophie stared at the table. Miles leaned back, then forward. Then still, a man finding out a tide doesn't take suggestions. Ken's voice didn't harden, it cooled. Mrs. Hart made deliberate, well-counseled moves before any petition. Her finances are organized, her cognition is intact, and the only influence we've documented is the petitioner's recorded plan to seize control under the flag of care, Mr. Pike objected. Chain of custody, relevance, the usual scaffolding you erect when the wall behind it is already cracked. The judge overruled, eyes on Sophie, then on me. "Mrs. Hart," she said, "would you like to say anything else?" I looked at my daughter. I remembered her at 7, putting a bandage on a chair leg because everything needs fixing sometimes. I remembered her at 12, sprinting the last hill home because she wanted to be the one to tell Tom dinner was ready. I remembered the long winter after Tom's heart went quiet and Sophie slept on my floor because the night had too many corners. "Your Honor," I said, "I love my daughter. But love without respect becomes control. I won't step into that." The judge nodded slowly. She shuffled papers the way women do to buy themselves one more moment to keep their face from telling the whole story. Then she read her order. Petition for emergency guardianship is denied. The court finds no evidence of incapacity or financial mismanagement. Furthermore, based on Exhibit H, the court has concerns regarding petitioner's motives and refers the recording to the proper authorities for review. The gavel is smaller than it sounds on television. Still, it landed like a door closing and opening at once. Sophie's shoulders folded in. Miles's jaw worked, then set. Mr. Pike gathered his papers in neat stacks, the kind of neat that hopes to mean something. When we stepped into the hallway, the light from the old windows fell across the floor like long, careful blessings. Sophie stood by the radiator, hands wrapped around herself, as if she'd finally realized how cold ambition can be when it doesn't wear a coat. "Mom," she said. It broke on the M. I waited. "I'm sorry," she managed. Her eyes slid toward Miles, then back to me. "We thought," Miles said. "Don't do that," I said gently. "Don't hand your choices to someone else and call it fate." Miles stepped forward, the salesman finding his script. "Eleanor, emotions are high. There were misunderstandings. We can create a family management plan. No, I said, and I felt Tom standing a little behind my left shoulder, nodding once, the way he did when a beam sat right. You don't get to rename what you tried to do. Change begins with accurate nouns. He opened his mouth, closed it, left without saying goodbye. Sophie stayed. We stood in the hallway that smelled like paper and bleach and old coats, two women whose lives had bent around the same man and then taken different roads. I miss Dad, she said. So do I said. We both looked at the floor as if grief was down there, creeping around our shoes. Can we try again? She said. Without plans. Just dinners. I'll bring the salad. And you can tell me I overdress the greens like you always do. I smiled small. You do. You drown a perfectly good lettuce. She half laughed, wiped her face with the heel of her hand. I do, she said. I'm sorry, Mom. Sorry as a door, I answered. You still have to choose to walk through it. I will, she said. I want to. We'll see, I said. We'll set a table. The rest is work. We walked down the courthouse steps together. At the bottom, she turned left toward the lot where Miles had parked their car. I turned right toward my truck with its dented fender and a grocery list on the passenger seat. Milk, onions, dog treats for a neighbor's spaniel who believed my porch belonged to everyone with good ears. The air tasted like snow that had changed its mind at the last minute. I stood for a moment and let it find my lungs. I was still me, and that mattered. 2 months is a long time when you measure it by dinners. We had 6, 3 at my house, 3 at hers, none at Basil and Bone because some places hold too much. The first was brittle, the second better, the third almost ordinary. Ordinary has a way of feeling like a miracle when you haven't tasted it in a while. I never asked Sophie about Miles. She never brought him. She set the table as if she were practicing something. She listened when I told the story about the cranberry sauce that slid out of the can looking like a church column and Tom preaching to it with a fork. She asked for the recipe for the brown bread I've made since 1978, when a neighbor with 3 kids and a talent for not measuring handed me a slip of paper that said only, molasses. Don't be shy. On the 7th week, an envelope came from the district attorney's office, a courtesy notice. The recording had been reviewed. A formal warning would be issued to Miles Rowan regarding attempted fraud tied to a guardianship filing. Future incidents would be met with charges. The letter was dry, official, unsentimental. It still felt like mercy pressed flat. I folded it into the file in my desk labeled House, after Tom. Then I made tea. That night, Sophie called. I left him, she said, not crying, not triumphant, just tired. I told him he can sort himself without sorting me. Do you need a bed? I asked. No, she said, I need a mother. Well, I answered, you have one. Part 3. The way back isn't fancy. Spring in Rockport is just winter with better stories, but crocuses are stubborn, and so are the women in my family. The harbor thawed. The gull cursed the postman with renewed purpose. I volunteered at the community workshop down by the cannery, showing kids how to read a tape measure without cheating to the nearest inch, and reminding them that wood tells you when it's ready if you listen with your hands. Sophie started showing up on Saturdays, hair pulled back, wearing the sweatshirt she used to steal from my closet in high school. She swept, she sanded, she held the other end of boards without acting like a martyr. We said little. We did much. Doing has always been our language when words are too proud to go first. One afternoon she set a small box on my workbench. Early birthday, she said. Inside lay a strip of cedar with shallow notches running up its length. The door jamb from her old bedroom, the one where I scratched her height every year with Tom's pocket knife and wrote the date in my cramped hand. She'd pulled it before we repainted, tucked it in a closet, carried it through 3 apartments, and a marriage that didn't keep what it promised. "I thought you didn't like souvenirs," I said. "I don't," she answered, "except the kind that tell the truth." We mounted it above the workbench. The kids asked why we'd hung a stick. We told them it was a story with measurements. In May, she wrote me a letter, not an email, not a text, a letter with ink that smudged on one corner where she'd reached for the kettle before it was dry. "Mom, I mixed fear and love and called it safety. I let someone else's hunger wear my face. I am not proud of that. I can't undo what I tried to do, but I can make different tries now. Thank you for drawing a line that didn't look like punishment. Thank you for leaving the light on." I read it once, then twice. I put it in the recipe box under brown bread, a place my hands already know how to find. Not every scene has a bow. Miles sent a terse email through his attorney requesting the return of a cast-iron skillet he'd bought to perfect high-heat ribeye and never learned to clean. The DA's office sent me a copy of their warning, both dry and useful as a winter coat. Neighbors asked careful questions in the produce aisle. I answered them with the weather. Some stories aren't for the people who weren't there. In June, I sat on my porch and watched the light slide across the red door. The chain on the swing creaked. Somewhere, a screen door snapped, the universal hymn of towns like this. A boy laughed. A dog was told he was very brave for scaring a leaf. The world does not end just because the people in it learn scary new words. Sophie arrived with a pie that looked like it had been negotiated into beauty. She set it on the railing. "I didn't overdress the salad," she said. "We'll see," I said. We ate. We left the dishes until the mosquitoes suggested we remember that nature has opinions. When we went inside, she stood a moment in the doorway and laid her palm on the jamb, where her tallest mark sits 1 nick shy of 5'7". "I used to think getting taller meant you were done with smallness," she said. "It just means you can reach the top shelf," I said. "The rest is practice." She nodded. "Are we okay?" she asked. "We're working," I said, because I have learned that promising okay too soon is just a polite lie. "And we're together. That's better than okay." She kissed my cheek. "I love you." "Good," I said. "Then bring the salad dressing to the table unopened." She laughed. "Bossy." "Experienced," I corrected. She left at 9. I washed the pie plates with the sponge that pretends not to be old. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the one Tom sanded until it felt like the back of a familiar hand, and wrote 3 lines on an index card I keep by the phone. I've never been a diary woman. I prefer notes with corners. Love needs respect to stand. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors you can knock on. Dignity doesn't crumble. I tucked the card under the sugar bowl where the morning can find it. Before bed, I opened the window. The harbor told me its story, the same one it's told since the year I was born and the year before that. I breathed. I thought of Tom and his pencil and the way he'd say, "level," like a benediction. I thought of Sophie and the way the word mom still fits like a sweater that learned my shape. Some people think justice looks like sirens. Sometimes it does. Other times it looks like a judge with soft eyes saying no with her whole face. Sometimes it looks like a letter that warns instead of wounds. Sometimes, when you're lucky and stubborn at once, it looks like a daughter standing in your kitchen, asking whether the molasses goes in before the buttermilk, and listening when you tell her why. I can still hear the whisper from that Sunday. "Keep her talking. I'll have the locksmith meet us." But it no longer lives in my chest like a splinter. It lives where it belongs, in a file folder labeled "Not for Us." This house will hold me as long as I hold it. The locks are changed, the deed is steady, the red door is a little more red because I bought the wrong paint and liked it anyway. If the gull ever retires, I'll write him a letter of thanks for scaring men off porches and mailmen into better habits, And if you ask me what I learned at 69, almost 70, here's my answer. You don't have to raise your voice to keep your life. You just have to know which door is yours and how to stand in it with your hand on the frame and say, "This is my home, this is my name. If you love me, knock. If you don't, keep walking. Then you make coffee. And when your daughter arrives with the salad dressing in one hand and humility in the other, you let her in